Nigerian Senate has suspended Kogi Central Lawmaker Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan for 6 months following her heated confrontation with the President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, during plenary on February the 20th. The suspension came after the Senate Committee on Ethics, Privileges and Public Petitions presented its report on the floor of the Senate in Abuja, which was overwhelmingly adopted by other lawmakers. Our National Assembly correspondent, Sageya Ibrahim, brings us more details.
These proceedings began. Plenary ran its usual course under the leadership of President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio. Lawmaker Akpoti-Uduaghan, however, introduced a fresh petition, further fueling the debate over her conduct.
The petition is against the President of the Nigerian Senate, Senator Godswill Akpabio, for sexual harassment, abuses of office.
Is there any legal impediment?
On the subject matter, none, sir.
Please proceed to lay the petition.
Shortly after, the Committee on Ethics, Privileges and Public Petitions submitted its report on the Senator's alleged misconduct during the February 20th plenary session.
That her behavior on the 20th of February 2025 was unethical and unbecoming of the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria by refusing to uphold the moral sanctity of the Senate and of the hallowed chamber.
Debate ensued.
Let the decision of the committee let it stand.
3 months is sufficient for some level of restitution.
My advice and appeal to her will be that she spends her period of suspension to read and learn our rules very well.
The President of the Senate then subjected the committee's recommendations to a voice vote, which resulted in an overwhelming approval for Akpoti-Uduaghan's suspension. However, an amendment was made following lawmaker Orji Uzakalu's appeal to exclude her legislative aides from the penalties.
It will be wrong to punish aides that have not committed any offense. The aides of Natasha is not Natasha.
That for the period of her suspension, she be barred from representing herself to the public locally and internationally as a Senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Those who support prayer 7 say aye. Those again say nay. The ayes have it.
In the end, Akpoti-Uduaghan had the final word.
This injustice will not be sustained.
As part of her suspension, she is barred from all legislative activities with her office sealed and Senate properties returned. She cannot access the National Assembly premises and her staff also restricted. Her salaries and allowances are suspended except for her legislative aides, and her security details have been withdrawn. She is prohibited from representing herself as a senator both locally and internationally. To seek reconsideration, she must submit a written letter of apology to the Senate. In Abuja for News Central, I'm Sageya Ibrahim.
Now, to help us understand and unpack the implications of this decision by the Senate, we're joined by our guest, Uthman Isa-Tochukwu, legal practitioner. Good morning and welcome to the conversation.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
Her final words as she exited the Senate was, "This injustice will not be sustained." Do you think that any injustice has been done to Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan?
Well, thank you very much. Before I delve into the issue proper, it is important for me to relate that I'm not here to hold brief for Senator Natasha. Neither am I here to hold brief for the red chambers, i.e. the Senate. I'm here to speak on the position of the law with regards to the issue, the legality and otherwise of her suspension in line with the extant laws in Nigeria. It is interesting to note, right, that the controversy, and that is answering your question whether or not injustice was done to her. The controversy that surrounds the suspension, whether or not the Senate or any legislative house at all within the law has the powers to suspend any of its members, had been laid to rest since 2017. Now, there are similar cases like that. If you recall the cases of Senator Ovi Oma Agege that once represented the Delta Central. There was issues like this that arose wherein he was referred to the Ethics and Privileges Committees of the Senate. And then they differed and he went to court after he was suspended for 180 days, which is also equivalent to 6 months. And later the Senate reviewed it and said it was 90 days, which is 3 months. He went to court to contest whether they have the right to suspend him. And the court agreed with him that the Senate lacks the powers to suspend any of its members beyond 14 days as provided for in their own Senate rules in section 67 sub 4 of that Senate rules. Now, it didn't stop there. Senator Dino Milaye's case against 10 others while he was in the House of Rep. There are also Senator Ali Ndume's case, similar to this with regards to suspensions. And the court was consistent. In fact, the most recent was Court of Appeal case, which was also in 2017 against Bauchi State House of Assembly, with Bauchi State House of Assembly against Rich Fatu, where the court held that you cannot suspend a sitting house or a sitting house member, whether a Senate or in the State House of Assembly. The reason is that when you do that, you would have deprived the constituents in which the senator represents in that house their legitimate right of representation. And that is what had happened in this case. And I think it's important for us to understand the political consequences or otherwise of what is happening or playing out in the Senate. Remember, this is about two issues. This is about two issues. On the 28th of that fateful day, right, Senator Natasha was sent to a particular seat for her to assume a new position. And there was a disagreement on her own part that she is not comfortable with the seat that was assigned to her. On that note, she raised a point of order, and the Senate shut her down because you are not properly on a good footing to raise any order. On the basis of that, there was an uproar, and they could not continue that proceeding. So the next thing we saw was that she had to go to Arise TV to hold an interview to explain that this thing is not just what we saw in the House. There were other issues before she now came back to present a petition before the Senate. Now, these are two issues. One is in refusal to assume her seat. Second was presenting a petition against the President of the Senate. The other one is against the General House, the Red Chamber, right? While the other one was exclusively against the person of the President of the Senate. And this makes the case very complicated and interesting. So on the basis of this, right, the Senate had referred her to the Senate Committee on Ethics and Privileges to determine and examine her attitude towards the Red Chamber and not to the Senate President. Now, the question to ask is this. When she presented her petition against the person of the President of the Senate, Senator Godswill Akpabio, CON, there was need, the moment Senator Natasha tendered that particular petition before the Senate, the moment she laid it before the Senate, what is the right thing to do at that time, considering the fact that the Senate President is sitting as the chairman of the entire Senate, considering the fact that the particular subject of the petition is addressed or directly against the person of the Senate President? He ought to excuse himself in order to not go against the principle of what we call in law.
So that means that you're agreeing that injustice was done to Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan.
Well, in line with the extant authorities from court, I felt it will not be proper to say that injustice was done per se, but it is litigatable. She can go to court to seek redress. Let the courts interpret whether or not they were proper. But if you look at the Senate extant rules, there was nowhere in their rules where they were giving powers to suspend a sitting senator and even suspend the person up to the maximum of 6 months.
Okay, let's speak.
What the rules provides is that you may suspend a particular senator who has been shown some contemptuous attitude against the red chamber. But the limit or how long we are going to suspend it was specifically provided for in section 67 of 4, which is 14 days. But the court had read that you cannot even suspend even for 1 day.
All right, so I mean, like you said, these issues can be debated in court, but Ringa?
Yes, let's look at some other issues that came up yesterday. 2 days ago, there was a court order, an ex parte order gotten by Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, restraining the Senate committee from sanctioning her and even sitting. Does this suspension amount to a breach of rule of law? And do you believe that Senator Natasha Akpoti was given a fair hearing, considering that she was not even present when the Senate committee finalized its report?
Yeah, if you recall what I said earlier, because of the nature of the twin case before the Senate, it becomes more political than legal. And the person whose Senator Natasha's petition was addressed to is the same person sitting at the chair of the entire Senate. Now, what happened is this. If you look at the nature of the two instant cases before the Senate, you will observe that there are some tricky politics that was on. Because for the Senate to consider her petition, what it means is that the Senate President will not be sitting to determine the petition on the merit because it is against him. He had to step aside for another person to wear his shoes to consider that. And because of that, the Ethics and Privileges Committee needed to act fast. They need to act fast so that they can bring that their conclusion on the report for the Senate to consider whether or not she is still fit to still remain with them. So two issues were pending. Petitions is there on the person of an individual, the President of the Senate. The second issue were there on the red chamber, on the Senate as an institution, because there was what they call bringing the entire Senate chamber to oblivion. And for me, I think that it is important for us to consider the fact that extremism in defense of liberty is no vice, just as moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. And on this note, I in all fairness to Senator Natasha Akpoti, nobody would face that kind of situation and would not be tempted, to take the kind of steps she took. And I think that at the end of the day, it is left for her to go to court and contest for her suspension, because we have had precedents over time that some other senators faced similar situations, and they went to court and the court ruled that suspending them in that manner and in the so number of days were unconstitutional.
All right, the issue of sexual harassment seems to have been, or there seems to be maybe a direct or an indirect attempt, whichever you decide to choose, to sweep the conversation about sexual harassment under the carpet and make it about ethics. But sexual harassment was a major issue, that arose out of all of this drama. How would you say that we are faring in terms of protecting women's rights? In conversations about sexual harassment, you heard Senator Florence Itagiwa when she did say that when you get to that position as a woman, you are above sexual harassment. I mean, those are not the exact words, but that was the spirit of what she was trying to say, that you get to that level and you're above sexual harassment. So how would you say we're faring as a nation, as a people, when it comes to upholding women's safety, preventing sexual harassment, and what picture has the red chamber painted when it comes to conversations about sexual harassment and protection of women's rights?
As far as this issue of sexual harassment is concerned, I want you to also understand that there are pending issues in the court filed by Senator Natasha on the basis of defamation with regards to this sexual harassment against the person of the President of the Senate and one of the aides. And for that, I may not be delving into it because of to amount to a sub judice. Since
correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that what she did say was that the issue is defamation because his special advisor on new media spoke about the transparent outfit, said that she was wearing transparent outfit, sort of inferring that she was moving to seduce, you know.
And her focus was on pancake, robbing makeup.
Yeah, so it wasn't really about whether or not the sexual harassment occurred. So I don't. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think that we can speak to that.
Yes. When you talk about sexual harassment and the manner through which the Senate treated that issue, I think that is even what animated the speedy, conclusion of the report of the Senate Committee on ethics and privileges, because, like I said, the political aspect of the story, the Senate were not interested in delving into the allegations substantially, because when they do, it means that the person of Senate President would have to step aside so that the matter would be determined on the merit. But that was preemptive. The report of the Senate's Privileges Committee were preemptive of that particular consideration. And this is the politics of what played out. And it's on this note that I would actually say that it was not handled properly. They were hasty in suspending Senator Natasha.
Now,
and when it comes to issue generally of sexual harassment, it's very unfortunate that even at the highest level, women are not spared. At the highest level, women are not spared in terms of sexual harassment. But at best, it's still an allegation. It's still an allegation,
okay.
and he who alleges must prove. So when the issue comes up, we hope that she would come and substantiate her allegations.
You say when the issue comes up, where do you think this issue will come up? Is it in the Senate?
She would have to, first of all, now she's suspended, whether it is constitutional legitimately or not, she would have to go to court to contest the legitimacy of her suspension. When the court rules, she can resume and proceed with the main issue. Because right now, I feel that it's not distracting, right? The subject matter is actually distracting. We are now being beclouded with issue of her suspension, rather than talking about the subject of the petition. And
now, talking about the subject of sexual harassment.
Or redress.
Now, Mr. Isa-Tochukwu, talking about the subject of sexual harassment, you already made it clear that she can go to the courts to contest her suspension. And you're saying she should wait to resume and then deal with the other petition, which she raised, the issue of sexual harassment. But we have institutions, law enforcement institutions in Nigeria. Don't you think it's high time the Nigerian Police or the Independent and Corrupt Practices Commission, ICPC, take up this case and look into the case of sexual harassment against the person of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan?
This is about law. I do not think that the ambit of the law within these two institutions that you mentioned, I do not think that their mandate cover that area, and it will not be effective to be pursuing two things at the same time. Her head is full now. But I want to believe, and even from professional perspective as a lawyer, that the first thing first should be done, which is what? Trying to approach the court to legitimize or to ask the court to void her suspension if she has a merit to prove that.
But are you saying that sexual harassment is not a criminal offense in Nigeria?
I can't hear you.
Are you saying sexual harassment is not a serious enough crime for the Nigerian police to investigate?
No, that is not what I'm saying exactly. What I'm saying is that so long as that petition is not tendered to Nigerian police, they will not just come into the matter. The matter was tendered before the Senate. And we all saw that the matter was tendered before the Senate. What is our worry now? The matter was tendered before the Senate. Rather than the Senate to consider it, they left it and they were talking about ethics and privileges. Do you now see what I'm saying? So it becomes like a calculated attempt to dump the issue or to prolong it. But I'm now saying that in order to revisit it, because the matter is already now pending before the Senate as a petition, You need to fight for your reversal to come back as a senator if the court agrees with your argument, which I believe the court may agree with your argument, and then looking at, other circumstances, looking at the precedent that the court has set over time in similar cases. Then when she comes back, she can activate that petition.
All right. Yesterday, of course, we did see the verdict being delivered by Senator Neda Bernards-Imasuen, who is the senator representing Edo Senatorial District and a member of the Labour Party. Let's take a listen.
What happened yesterday was based on the activities that took place on the floor of the Senate on the 20th of February of 2025, where the distinguished Senator Natasha Akpoti was reassigned to another seat, which she vehemently refused to obey, and that led to a situation in the Senate that was considered unbecoming of a senator. And based on that, another senator moved a motion on the 25th to complain about the behavior of the distinguished senator, and asked that on this motion, and asked that the behavior that occurred on the 20th be revisited and considered for disciplinary action. The motion was then referred to our committee of ethics, privileges, and public petition to investigate into that action. And that's what we did. And the committee sat, all parties involved were invited to come and give a position on it. And the distinguished Senator Natasha did not appear. So we went on to deliberate, and then we came up with what was presented as the recommendation of the committee to the floor today. We our lawyers sent an interim order to my office. We were already seated to hear the petition. I just came to the office to pick up my copy of my constitution when my secretary gave me a letter from a lawyer, and when I went to the next page, I realized that it was an interim order. And so I knew, therefore, because we were waiting for her to come, I knew as a result that she wasn't going to appear because she may have been advised by her lawyers not to attend, and indeed she did not attend, despite waiting for about an hour for her. So I would presume that that is the reason why she did not attend. And I also have to state that the notice was given to her, which she acknowledged, and the notice of the hearing was also announced on the floor of the Senate. The time and place of the hearing was also announced. So she was well aware of the sitting of the committee.
We'll come back to talk about, how Senator Imasuen has handled all of this and some of the criticism that has been leveled against him. But he did mention that Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan did not turn up, maybe based on the advice of our lawyers. And what I'd like to ask you now is, did she err on the side, did she err by not showing up? And we don't know what the actual reasons were for her not turning up. But was that enough a reason for things to have eventually turned out the way they have?
No.
Are you with us? All right. We're hoping that we can reconnect with him so he can speak to us as to whether she was well within her rights or not. All right, welcome back. So please go ahead. Was she within her rights to not turn up, or did she err in any way?
If you look at the circumstances surrounding her situation at the time, it would be very it will be very unfortunate and very unfavorable for her to appear before that committee, considering the fact that they had already tendered a petition against the chairman of the Senate, the entire Senate committee. Now, the particular committee we are talking about that is inviting her is going to sit to determine a matter that affects her, of which the person he has a case with is the chairman of the entire Senate. I do not think that there will be justice at that point, because the principle of nemo judes in Kasaswa would have been breached. If I have an issue with you and you have to sit as an arbiter in that particular matter, you cannot be a judge in your own case. And I think on the basis of that, she is a lawyer and she understood this principle and feels that since this guy that I submitted petition before him, against him, is also the chairman of the entire committee of the Senate, and one of those committees is inviting me, it's not ideal for me to attend because I know I won't get justice. And
so in other words,
what happened? This is exactly what happened during the time of Senator Omo Agege. When the Senate Privileges Committee invited him, the committee invited him and he refused to show up because he believes that the then Senate President Bukola Saraki they were not in good terms, and he doesn't think he will get justice.
So in other words, what you're saying is that they cannot claim to have been able to say that they upheld fair hearing by giving her a chance to speak when they were a judge in their own court.
Fair hearing in law is two.
Great. Let's talk about
this in Kasakwa.
All right.
And because of that basis, the moment that particular one was breached, then it becomes very impossible for the other party to appear because he will just feel that he won't get justice.
All right. Now let's talk about Senator Imaswen and how he's handled all of this. Now one of the excerpts of the videos that we've seen on social media, we've played this as well, would be where he said Senator Natasha Akpoti's petition was dead on arrival. And there are many people who said that even him saying that at all was an implication and showed some measure of bias without even giving her a chance. How would you say he has handled all of this? And do you think that there was anything he could have done differently? If yes, what are these?
No matter how frivolous we may think that the allegation is, no matter how frivolous the Senate may have seen that allegation, it's like going to court to file an application that you may think that court will consider useless. No matter how useless that application is, court is bound by law to take it. So no matter how frivolous, how unfounded they think that allegation is on that sexual harassment contained in that petition, the Senate were bound to take the petition, regardless of how they may feel or their biases about it. And the most unfortunate thing is that they refused to take the petition, came back to the House the next day, referred the matter of what happened on the 28th to the Ethics and Privileges Committee to determine. So the report is preemptive. So if you look at this whole thing, it's not becoming more of political than legal to silence her. It's becoming more political than legal to make her not to speak on and follow the subject matter, because the intention of every Nigerian were to see how she was going to substantiate that allegation of sexual harassment. And now there were no space created now to talk about it.
Now, Mr. Isa-Tochukwu, you've spoken well about the perception. You said it's like a political and also legal things happening. Now, looking at holistically at the way this controversy is played out, how does this controversy affect the image and the credibility of the institution of the Nigerian Senate in the eyes of the public, the way they've handled it so far?
I feel very sad. I feel very sad, especially as a lawyer who had sworn to an oath to uphold the rule of law, that the Senate is playing this kind of games. The Senate, with all due respect to the sanctity of the Senate, anytime allegations such as this comes up, I think the best thing to do to maintain that sanctity of that institution is to make everything bare, open it for transparency, and let us see how they go about resolving the issue. But the most unfortunate thing itself is what I heard from the Chairman Senate Committee on Ethics and Privileges yesterday. And I have to correct it on this platform, he said that whatever they do, there should be separation of powers, that the court does not have the right to delve into their affairs. That is to some extent in the business and the activities that guide the proceedings of the Senate. That is where the court does not have issue. Not that the Senate, as an individual senator that occupies that place, like the president of the Senate, cannot be summoned by court to attend to proceedings. They are not covered under Section 308 that provides for immunity. So for that purpose, it is inconceivable to think that because you are a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, with all due respect, that the courts cannot summon you to come and answer to certain allegations. So long as that allegation does not border within the precinct of proceedings that was conducted in the National Assembly, with all due respect, sir, you can't be invited by the court. You can be sued and be sued.
All right. Thank you for pointing that out. So now, how do we ensure fairness? How do we ensure checks and balances? Because if we start to go through a list of people who have been suspended, this is not the first time we've seen senators being suspended, from Senator Femi Okoromu in 1999, Joseph Waku in Benue 2000. We can start to go through a list of senators who have been suspended. In some of these cases, they had issues with the Senate President, who, for example, in this case, is also, seen to be a judge in his own court. So how can we ensure checks and balances and credibility for future reference?
Simple. It's very simple. It's very simple. Because if you look at the institution of the Senate, it is a creation of law. The Constitution created the Senate, that red chamber, and the institution. So for the fact that the Senate President has been indicted by this allegation, the best thing to do, in accordance with the provisions of the law, is to comply with that principle of nemo judes in causa suo. You have to excuse yourself and allow independent investigation for the matter to be well sorted out in accordance with the law. But again, we need to also look at the fact that the main thing that should happen now, like I've said before, this is now like this issue of sexual allegation now cannot even come up anymore, because what the distinguished Senator Natasha should be battling now is how she can come back as a senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And how will he do that? How will she do that in the face of this suspension? Is by going to court. If she drives back to the Senate in that house tomorrow, they can arrest her. And because the Senate has sat, whether or not it is legitimate, she has to go and test the legitimacy or otherwise in court.
All right.
Come back.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. The conversation still continues, and we appreciate you sharing the legal insight on this subject matter.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.